Okay, so one of the things we wanted to do with the underground was kind of, we looked at a lot of different reference for what we wanted it to look like, the hollow. Some of that reference was saltwater fish tanks and stuff like that, and deep sea areas, and a lot of the plant life and the bioluminescent stuff that's down there is something that we wanted to have scattered throughout the hollow. So this image that you're looking at here is there's these giant worms, they're rift worms, and they sink cities. So this is kind of a preliminary sketch of one of the sunken cities and what it might look like if you were looking at the E-hole from within out to the sunken city. This is a concept of the hollow. This is kind of, we wanted to do a couple different things with the locust architecture. We wanted to have older parts. Like any civilization, you've got older parts, and then new people come along and they kind of build on top of that and stuff. So this is kind of the older, more ancient locust areas. There's a lot of runic things down there, and a lot of crazy, like, resin secreted designs. And if you've ever split a log and checked out how worms tunnel through wood and stuff like that, that's kind of a lot of the look that we were going for some of these type of areas. Same thing here, just really like runic, crazy, little bit of plant life here and there and stuff. Lots of insectoid designs, things like that. This is the krill spawning pits. This is kind of where the krill, their larvae, they raise their young in these things, and it's just these huge swirling pits of maggoty goodness that just, you know, it's disgusting, but pretty cool to play in. This is some of that saltwater reference that I was talking about. You know, real colorful looking bioluminescent plants and things like that. The rockworm on the right is a little red polyp, and the rockworms, these are kind of the rockworm food, and they go around throughout caves, and I think an intervention, and you'll see them start to gobble these things up, and you can kind of predict where they're going while they gobble them up and stuff. The other stuff is just kind of different experimentations with plant life and things like that might look nice down there. Some of the locust architecture, again, real like kind of secreted resins. We looked at a lot of like insectoid things, wormwoods, stuff like that. Not so much utilitarian carvings, but and it's their idea of what the design might be. This image is a cave area. This is kind of, is this Maria, I think, or Highway? I think this is Highway. And so what this is like kind of old locust roadways and stuff, all busted up, and a lot of ancient things down here, and little locust areas that they've long forgotten. This too, just further exploring some of the locust architecture, what they might have, lots of riggings and crane work and primitive lifts and things like that, a lot of their abandoned construction equipment, low-level lighting, real mood piece. This too is kind of a pullback, more of an exploration of what some of the newer locust construction would look like being done on top of some of the older ruined areas. We looked at a lot of like ancient temples and things like that to get some reference for these areas. Some details of what the temples might look like. Again, going for ancient temple stuff, real insectoid, crazy secreted yuckiness. We wanted lots of the forms to be built out of solid rock. So the tooled areas usually kind of extend from the rough rock in certain areas. And we tried to do that throughout the hollow, so it looked really cool, like they've just tunneled into the caves and they're creating these forms out of the cave structures and stalactites and things like that. This is kind of a close-up of the palace. The palace is like a giant hive that hovers over an emulsion field down in the hollow. Again, we wanted it to look ornate, not too crazy. We wanted them to use, if you look at the level nexus palace, there's a lot of coppers and metals that you would find down underground. We wanted them to use like found materials that they would find mining and things like that. Here's a pullback to real close-up of palace. These are kind of the front gates of the palace. You've got real rough-hewn rock, and you've got these funky designs, alien-like, just crazy insectoid. This was an early version of Palace, the Palace entryway. And in this, Shane kind of called out certain structures on the right there. You can see kind of some of the detailed stuff. This image is the Locust throne room. That thing down at the end there is the Queen's throne, and this is kind of where she's worshipped and holds court. We wanted this area to look more pristine than some of the other areas. You know, down in the ground levels, they've polished the floors, things like that. But yet, you still got that rough-hewn cave structure. Here's a detail of the Queen's throne. Real organic looking, carving, resins, secretions, all that fun stuff. These are some Locust lights. We you know, like every other construction and architecture, you want to have your own light sources and stuff. So we wanted some unique light structures that the Locust would use to light their way and down in the hollow. A lot of this stuff is powered by emulsion and all that. Here's a concept comparison. Lower left, you'll see the concept of highway, and then the large image is actually from an in-game screenshot. So you can kind of see how close we're getting to the concepts with this iteration of technology.
This is an image of how Nexus looks in the wireframe mode. The teal colored wireframe means that it's a standard static mesh, which means it's not moving, it's not fracturable, it's just the standard stuff that makes up the core of the level. The more royal blue color, that's the fracturable static meshes. Those are the meshes that you can take cover behind and the pieces will chip off the edges and disintegrate. The purple, some of the purple lines you'll see, that's some volumes that determine the post-process settings, collisions settings, and things like that. Down here underneath, next to most of this fracture stuff, you'll see little circles with men standing on them. Those are actually cover nodes. That's where we determine where the player can go into cover. And basically with those nodes you can say it's standing height cover, crouching cover, whether or not the player can peek around the sides or mantle over it. There's a lot of options you can do with that. All the lines connecting those are basically paths that the player can take and that the AI will follow throughout the level. In this shot you'll see the version of the Nexus without any textures. This is basically just the lighting information. You can see a lot of the bright yellow towards the bottom. That's the lighting coming from the emulsion. Basically that's the fuel source that the Sarens were fighting over in the original Pendulum Wars. A lot of this orange lighting over to the side is coming off of fire. The basic goal of this level was to have the fire be kind of the key visual points of navigation, so you're always going towards the fire and always staying away from the emulsion, so we had to sort of set a color scale. Yellow are basically out of bounds areas, orange is basically the safe path to go, and blue basically fills out any of the other areas. So in this shot, you'll see the full-on textured lit version of Nexus. The building in the background there is basically the palace where the Queen lives, where all the information about coordinating the Locust attacks, all their data centers and everything are inside this palace in the center. You can see some of the bridges leading off the palace. All that stuff leads to other Locust living quarters. This is basically the big underground city where all the Locusts live, so it's huge. There's just tons of places for them to be. On the left-hand side here, you'll see a guard tower. Basically, when you come in here, there'll be snipers in that tower that instantly get a bead on you and start shooting at you, and you'll basically have to run into cover and take them out. In this image, you'll see a lot of these lines in the floor are basically rails that the pop-up cover is sitting in. So basically the Locusts have come up with this way to fortify the area where they live by building cover into the ground. So whenever the emulsified drones come in, they can pop this cover up and defend from the bad guys that are down here. So this is basically what pushed the Locusts out in the first place. They were fighting this war with the emulsified drones underground. So in this shot you'll see some of the area where the Locusts live when they're not fighting. A lot of the shapes were meant to try to mimic like old style cottagey type houses, but carved out of stone. The spots on top are sort of represent chimneys. The windows here have the lights on to sort of give the feeling that there's more people in there just hanging out. I wanted to try to make it look like this stuff was sort of growing, kind of organic. So some of the shapes on top are sort of viney to try to anchor it down, like as if it was all carved out, and then more rock sort of grew over it. In this shot, you'll see the slaughterhouse where the locusts kill the rockworms. The rockworms are a main source of food for the locust, but they have a really tough exterior, which is why you can use them for cover in the game. They've basically come up with a way to kill these rockworms and eat them. On the right-hand side, there's basically cages. You can't really see it in the shot, but in the level you'll see it. There's little cages over here where the rockworms are. And they basically pull the rockworms out down into this trough here, flip this lever here, and chop up the worms into little bits, and then they can eat it. The cool part about this area, though, is that you can come in here and sort of lower the locusts down into the trenches, and then use the grinders against them. You can chew them up. It's pretty fun. This shot here is basically one of the first shots you see of the Nexus underground, where you start to realize that these are actual intelligent creatures that actually have a sense of structure and architecture, and they've built these fortified areas to defend themselves. So the inspiration for this shot came from old sort of Gothic castles with spires and everything. The idea here was to sort of make it look like the locusts were more intelligent, not just these creatures that only thought about fighting. They actually plan defensive perimeters and set up defense walls and everything to protect their civilians. One of our artists, Kevin Johnstone, took a lot of inspiration from Tibetan rooftops and places in Nepal, and he came up with this sort of unique look to the tops of some of these towers. Like you can see it on the guard tower there. Basically, we wanted the locusts to seem smart, but not too smart, so that's why they've got fire as their light source instead of a lot of electronic equipment and everything. They're sort of meant to be barbaric, but also intelligent. This is the very first shot you'll see of Nexus. It's sort of a holding area. It's basically a big fortified wall. It's meant to give you the impression that there's something sacred on the other side of the wall, which is actually the palace. So you basically come out here, you see the big wall, and then you think, oh man, I gotta get around that wall and see what's on the other side. And so you basically work your way through here. You can see some pop-up cover and a little lever down here at the bottom. That basically gives you a little introduction to how the pop-up cover works. It'll let you play with it, but nothing really happens yet. Then you make your way through here, and then that's where you'll get the first main shot of the big underground Nexus area with the palace and everything.